All right, guys, should be another quick video today. 13-2 from Shurley is up on Google Classroom as an assignment. I believe last Friday's video goes over that if you want to go back and check, or just look at 13-2 in your book. It's asking about simple comparative and superlative forms of adjectives and adverbs. It's multiple choice, should be pretty straightforward, especially if you use your book or my video. There, I think, is one that's kind of tricky. You'll know which one it is when you get to it, but if you take your time, and especially if you look at my video from last Friday, you'll know the answer. So take your time with that one. Do well on it. It's only 5 questions. Again, I'm still trying to give you plenty of time to work on this poetry project. Some of you have already sent it to me, completely done, and they look good so far from what I've seen. So good job on that. Again, it's not a terribly difficult assignment. Lots of people are going to get 100s on this or A's. As long as you follow instructions, you'll do really well. But today we're going to talk about Shurley chapter 13, lesson 3. This is double negatives. So a double negative is when you have 2 negative words in a sentence. Pretty obvious, right? This is a grammatical error. It's something that's wrong. You don't want to do it in your writing. There are times to do it if you're writing creatively, like a story or a poem, and you're doing it intentionally to make a point, to exaggerate something, or if you're doing it when a character's speaking, to show that maybe a character doesn't always speak in correct English. Those cases, it's fine, but don't get in the habit of doing it. A lot of us do this in our speech when we talk, especially because we're Southern, right? Being from Alabama, there's a lot of, ain't no way I'm doing that, that kind of thing. I grew up talking that way. I'm not going to tell you I don't still say things like that, sometimes joking, but it's not the correct way to communicate in writing. Okay, I don't mind if you say it sometimes, but don't do it in your writing. And what we're concerned with now is being able to recognize them and being able to fix them. Okay, so I'm going to show you that you can fix them a few different ways. You want to maintain what the intended meaning of the sentence is when you do that, though. And if you want a little more information, you can look at reference 185 in Shurley chapter 13, lesson 3. That would be useful. It gives you a list of what are considered negative words. Basically, most words that start with an N, they're like no, nowhere, no one, never, nothing, things like that. But also words like barely, hardly, scarcely, words with prefixes like non, un, or dis. Those are negative words. They're words that negate something. They're the opposite of something. And if you're confused by that, like I said, look at that table on 185 that shows you some of them. But here I've got any negatives in these sentences highlighted. And if it's incorrect, if it's a double negative, I've got it highlighted in red. So for the first one, there isn't no, or if you want to go Southern with it, there ain't no way I'll go. That's a double negative. It's basically, by having 2 negatives, you're basically saying there is a way I'll go, right? It turns it into a positive. So we want to fix this to maintain what the original meaning of the sentence is, because obviously this person is trying to say, I'm not going. So we could say there is no way I'll go, get rid of the isn't, or we can say there isn't any way I'll go. So we change the no to a different word. Either of these are completely fine. They don't change what the intended meaning of the sentence was, but they do fix the double negative issue so that the sentence makes logical and grammatical sense. Same thing here with number 2. There aren't barely any people here. This one's a little bit more complicated because barely is a negative word, but meaning-wise, there's no word that we can use to just flip it, right? So we can get rid of the aren't and change it to are. So there are barely any people here, because with these contractions, the negative part is actually the N apostrophe T, which is not, right? So there is not no way I'll go. There are not barely any people here. Get rid of the not. There are barely any people here. That's fine. Maintains the intended meaning. There aren't many people here. This is also fine. This is combining that barely any, flipping its meaning to many. Now that's a little bit more complicated way of changing the sentence, because we're taking liberty with what words are actually in the sentence and putting in new words of our own, but meaning-wise, it's fine. This is probably easier to do and easier to keep track of, but this would also be completely fine. Now, what's wrong with this? There aren't any people here. This gets rid of barely, okay? But just getting rid of barely, scarcely, hardly, anything like that changes the overall meaning of the sentence. There aren't barely any people here was obviously meant to mean there are very few people here, right? There aren't many people here. There are barely any people here. Both of those maintain that meaning. There aren't very many people. If we're expecting 100 and there are 15, we would say there are barely any people here. In this case, there aren't any people here. Yes, it's grammatically correct. There's only one negative, as I've got highlighted, but again, it changes the meaning of the sentence. This is 0 people. There are no people here. It's a small difference, but it's different enough to make the sentence different than what it was originally intended to be, and it's incorrect. So you have to be careful on ones like that. This is a little more simple. I will never not eat at McDonald's. This is the kind of thing you could say in creative writing as a joke to mean the actual double negative. Like, I will not eat at McDonald's means you're not eating there. I will never not eat at McDonald's means you're going to eat there all the time forever. You might do that as a joke, as an exaggeration in creative writing. But if you wanted to make this grammatically correct and actually make sense, I will never eat at McDonald's, or I will not eat at McDonald's. I will not eat at McDonald's. This is just removing one of the negatives, whichever one you choose. Both maintain that same meaning, roughly, because here we're not entirely sure what the person's trying to say, right? Unless we assume that they are joking around. So we've got slightly different meanings here. I will never eat at McDonald's, or I will not eat at McDonald's. One is, not right now. This is a one-time statement, we're assuming, in the context, or without context, rather. I will never eat at McDonald's. That's kind of a pronouncement of never, no matter what, ever again. So there's a little bit different meaning there. But being that we can't tell here what is intended, it's not like up here where we're changing the meaning, because we don't know what the meaning originally was supposed to be here. Okay, so that's totally fine. One thing I'm realizing that I should probably point out, let me do one more example, since it would probably help to see it. So if we have a sentence that says, I haven't, well, I thought that would correct. I haven't hardly, never, had, no, luck. We'll put it like that. I haven't hardly, never, had no luck. So going with what I did up above and highlighting all the negatives, really we can just highlight that in apostrophe T on haven't, but we'll highlight the whole word. We have 4 negatives here. Okay, we don't call it a quadruple negative, even though that would technically be correct. What we do is we just consider it a double negative. So how do we fix it if it's got all of these negatives? Do we just take one out? Do we take 2 out? No, you have to take it down to where there's only 1 negative. There are a lot of ways to do that. And being that this sentence is very convoluted, which means all kind of twisted up. Sorry, typing one-handed is rough. Meaning it's all twisted up. It means that it's difficult for us to really tell what this person was trying to say at all. It's much worse than number 3 in that regard. So depending on which negative we leave, because we need to leave at least one to maintain meaning. I'm sorry, I'm trying to type and talk and everything else. In order to do that, it's going to be kind of difficult, really. We have to kind of guess at what the person meant. And you're going to see that I'm going to put 4 different variations of this one sentence that use each one of the different negatives. And they all have slightly different meanings. Okay, they all, none of them exactly mean the same thing, and they all do relate back to the original sentence, and they would all be fine if I asked you to correct this sentence, but none of them are perfect one-for-ones of what the sentence probably was intended to mean, because we don't know what the sentence was intended to mean. So we could leave haven't. I haven't had luck. Okay, that implies like recently I haven't been very lucky. I hardly had luck. That means maybe I had a little bit of luck, but not a lot. I never had luck. That's like, in all of my life, I've never had luck. I had no luck. This is pretty similar to this one, okay? It's just grammatically different. But all these are slightly different, not just in the way they look, but in their meaning. They all are definitely okay as corrections for this sentence. But again, if you get something this complicated with this many negatives, it makes the sentence so confusing that any of these would be acceptable, because we don't know what this sentence was originally supposed to mean. If anybody ever came up with this sentence, it would almost have to be a joke making fun of the character speaking. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a sentence with that many negatives in it in real life. But again, if you have 3, 4, 5, 79 different negative words in a sentence, reduce it down to 1. As long as you've only got 1, like hardly, haven't, never, no, it does not matter which one you have in a sentence like that. The only time it's going to matter is in a sentence like this, where there are 2 negatives and one of them is barely, hardly, or scarcely, because you have to be very careful with how you handle getting rid of barely, because you could end up changing the meaning, like in this example. All right, so I think that should be it for double negatives. Should be fairly simple and straightforward. It's probably something you already knew, but doesn't hurt to cover it. So look at reference 185 if you're unsure. There'll be an exercise on this tomorrow. And then, let's see, well, tomorrow, depending on which class you are. And then in the next video up, I'm going to review the 2 lessons of chapter 12 we've done and the 3 of chapter 13. And then on Friday for each class, we will have a chapter 12 and 13 Shurley quiz. It will be a quiz grade. I'm thinking probably 25 questions. We'll see. Might put them at a point apiece, might put them at 2 points apiece. I'll have to think about it, and it will be a quiz grade, so either a 25 or 50-point quiz grade. Depending on how long and difficult it is, I'll decide, how much it should be worth. I don't anticipate it being very hard, though, and again, you can use your book, you can use my videos, any notes you've taken, anything like that, to make it as easy as possible. But make sure you get today's exercise done, the one on comparative adjectives and adverbs. Let me know if you have any questions on that or anything else, and make sure you get that poetry project done and turned in. Again, it's open for submission on Turn It In, due by midnight Friday. All right, see you guys.